Welcome back, everybody, and let's start where we left off, right? Okay, so we were discussing in the previous lecture. I gave you a context to Cicero's ideas and thoughts, and today we will look into his. We'll start with the Officiis, right, on moral duties or on duties. But before we do that, I want to give you a very brief panoramic view about first I will give you an idea about what for him the best regime is before we actually get into the Officiis, because this will give you a contextual background as to why he is propounding certain kind of virtues over other. So I think this is essential that we know this. And then after that, I'll try to differentiate and try to make clear the various kinds of the different levels of virtues or morality which he speaks about, right? Okay, so before we start, I want to make known to the readers, to the listeners and whatnot, to viewers and whatnot, that you see Cicero's the Officiis, right, on moral duties or on duties which we are dwelling on, which we'll be looking into. Cicero's the Officiis is a book he wrote for his son, for his very young son, relatively young son, who was currently studying in Athens, in Greek, right? He was studying in Athens, he was in Greece, Athens, and then he was studying under, he was learning the ancient great thinkers, works of ancient great thinkers. But Cicero wrote this while he was in exile. You see, Cicero tried to salvage the Roman Republic, right? We now speak of the Roman Empire, right? So the Roman Empire was practically from the demise of the Roman Republic. So if you look at the whole Roman age, the age of like Rome, then it spans to close to 1,000 years, right? So that says something about the resilience of the civilization. But Cicero was he was in favor of the Republic, the Roman Republic, and he tried to salvage the Roman Republic from ruins. However, in the end, he could not. He was exiled, and it was during his exile, with the fall of with the fall of Roman Republic, that he wrote this the Officiis for his son, who was in Athens. So it's Cicero is an admirable character. If you look at as a statesman, as an orator, and as a philosopher, you can't help but admire his tenacity, his quest for wisdom, not just knowledge, wisdom, and also his quest to be more virtuous. I think that's something which all of us in modern society lack. And as you can see on your screen, right, he was a great orator. The person in the middle, on the screen where he's standing and speaking in front of the Senate was him. That's Cicero, right? He was speaking in that's the ancient Roman Senate, right? So yeah, here we go. And this is something that you need to know, because he was trying to salvage the Roman Republic, but in the end he could not, and thus we see the rise of Caesar, right? Julius Caesar. So Julius Caesar brought an end to the Roman Republic, and Cicero wanted to, stop the rise of Roman Empire, but then, not stop the Roman Empire. There was no such thing as an empire, but then Cicero tried to make sure that, the Roman Republic will not come to ruins, which unfortunately, it did not pan out as the way he had hoped for. And maybe that's, if you look at it, that is an irony, right? Irony of history, irony of human condition, maybe. Because if you look at Socrates and Plato and Aristotle and Cicero, they were all speaking of a kind of regime which had been lost, right? Which had been lost to the human condition, which has been lost to the human history. Because when Socrates spoke of the best form of regime, or Plato, especially Socrates, it was something that has existed, maybe it might have existed in the past, or maybe if Aristotle, the kind of regime which he speaks of, maybe it might have existed in the past. Maybe they were trying to revive and put life into a dying system, which did not help, which was not salvageable. Much in the same way, even Cicero was trying to. His best ideal regime was the Roman Republic, right? But then he was speaking in times when the Roman Republic had already been gone. The Roman Republic was demised, right? There was the demise of Roman Republic. It was a fall of Roman Republic, and then rose with Julius Caesar, the Roman Empire, which all of us have heard. And that's the irony, because they were trying to save something which was not savable, right? Trying to salvage something which was not salvageable. Maybe that's the irony, and the irony and a cruel joke on the ideas of philosophers, isn't that? The philosophers have lofty ideas about how a society should be organized, but then the reality is that such a thing had happened, or such a thing could not ever exist, right? Such as with Plato, right? The rule by philosopher rulers, maybe that's not possible, or the kind of regime hoped for by Aristotle and Cicero had already been gone, has already been lost to the past. So maybe that's something that it's interesting that we should keep that in mind. Okay, so Cicero, you see, like I mentioned in the previous video lecture, I mentioned that for Cicero the best regime was the mixed regime, right? And by that it means, if you remember Aristotle, by mixed regime it means you have the wealthy, you have the common people, or the poor, the plebeians, and then you have the middle class. So something like that. And then what Cicero spoke of, the Roman Republic, was a good exemplification of that mixture, of the mixed regime. Cicero, above all else, and this is where I believe him to be influenced by Aristotle, is that he was a bit more practical, right? He was practical in his in the way he approached politics, and in the way he approached how things ought to be. And maybe that's because of maybe he was influenced by Aristotle, I do not know, but also because he was a statesman, right? He was an orator. He was in a sense politician, in a sense you can say that. So he was more into he was leading a life. He was leading an active life of as a statesman, as an orator, as a politician. So he knows that politics has to be a bit more practical. That's why maybe he aligns with Aristotle in terms of which is the best regime. Of course, we know that he got his idea of mixed regime from Polybius, a Greek historian. But we also know that we get the idea of mixed regime from Aristotle, even prior to Polybius. So those are some things that we can infer. I cannot be certain, but then those are the certain things that we can infer about his views about Cicero, right? All right. So he speaks of and also one thing which is quite similar, which Cicero is quite similar with Aristotle. And when I say Cicero is similar with Aristotle, I do not mean to say that Cicero is not an original thinker. I'm not trying to say that Cicero is an unoriginal political philosopher. I'm not saying that he's very, very original, but I'm just saying some of the similar things that were striking for me, and which I think you should know also, right? Is that he was more into he tried to his whole idea was that he tried to whatever the problems is about the human reality, about the political organization, the political community, is that we have to be a bit more practical, so that whatever we try to solve an issue or a problem, it should be something, even if we are trying to establish some sort of political organization or political community or society, is that we must try to attain something that is most probable, right? We're not saying we should practical, right? We should try to set something which is practical, which is probable in the real world, which can actually exist here on Earth, right? Not like the lofty ideas of Plato, but then something which is actually achievable here on Earth. So in that sense, he was quite practical, just as Aristotle was. And so for him, when he speaks, so for him, like unlike but here's one of the originalities about Cicero, right? Is that unlike the ancient Greek philosophers prior to him, right, such as Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, whose ideas, right, these Greek thinkers, their base regime was their idea of base regime is not necessarily in existence anywhere on earth, right? When you think about Aristotle's ideal, the most ideal regime, for Aristotle, the most ideal regime is not the mixed constitution, but it's monarchy, right? If you remember, it's monarchy or kingship. Or if you look at Plato's ideal regime, the rule by philosopher rulers, right? So, and even Socrates, for him, if you are actually truly, into all these things, then you are beyond the state, beyond the society, right? You are contemplating the sublime. So if we compare Cicero with these Greek thinkers, their base regime is not to be found anywhere in existence, anywhere on earth, right? The actual base regime of Plato and Aristotle is not necessarily in existence anywhere here on earth. Compare that with Cicero, right? For Cicero, it was the mixed regime, but this mixed regime, right, the best regime for him, is actually found here on earth. That was actually in existence here on earth, and that was the Roman Republic, right? For Cicero, the Roman Republic was the best regime, was the ideal regime, right? When you speak of the most ideal regime, for Cicero, it was the Roman Republic, right? Roman Republic that was characterized by mixed regime. However, right, unlike but on the other hand, if you look at the Greek thinkers, their ideal regime, their best regime, were not existence anywhere on earth, and in fact, it was not possible here on earth, right? Because the standards were too high. However, for Cicero, the best regime, when he spoke of the best regime, that is the mixed regime, it was actually found here on earth, right? Okay, but you get my point, right? It was actually in existence on earth. It was actually in existence. You had an actual existence of the best regime for Cicero, and that best regime, that best actual regime, was the Roman Republic, right? And you see, when I speak of the Roman Republic, here it is. I'll give you an idea. I'll give you what it is. You see, the Roman Republic was more or less was quite democratic, but like in a very relative sense, right? It was a republic, and you had, just like in Aristotle, mixed polity. When Aristotle speaks of mixed polity, he says, well, you see, the thing is this: you need to have the rich, also you need to have the poor, and also you need to have the middle class, right? So you have those mixed regime, this mixed constitution. So similarly, for Cicero, the Roman Republic was characterized by the mixed regime, and for Cicero, the Roman Republic, which is a mixed regime, which is characterized by mixed regime, was constituted by the patricians, which were the wealthy families in Rome, right? The Roman Republic was constituted by the patricians, which were the wealthy families, and then you had the Council of Plebeians, right? The Council of Plebes, which represented the interests of the poor, and then you had the Senate, as you can see on the screen. Those were the Senate. Again, they were more or less, selected from the affluent part of the Roman society, and they were quite influential, right? They were quite influential, the Senate. And then you had, and then the Roman Republic was led by two consuls, right? Two consuls, or like you can say like two presidents. You have two presidents, right? You have two presidents, just like that. So there are two consuls. So the Roman Republic was a mixture of this. Was a mixture of the rich, which were known as the patricians, which represented the interests of the wealthy. And then you had the Council of the Plebes, which represented the interests of the poor. And then you had the Senate, which advised the government, but then they were more powerful than the actual functioning as it was written down. And then the whole society was led by two consuls, right? Consuls. and they were the two consuls, and they were elected for 1 year. And this was more or less for Cicero the best regime that you can find, and the best regime that is actually possible, that is actually probable, and then that can actually exist, right? But then the thing is this: when he speaks of this mixed regime, in other words, it was a mixed regime. In other words, it was constituted by a mixture of monarchy, aristocracy, and democracy, right? Hence, we get a mixed regime. So there we go. There you have it. The monarchy part was represented by the consul, right? And then the aristocracy by the patricians, and the democracy aspect by the plebes or the plebeians. So there you have it, the mixed regime of the Roman Republic. And for Cicero, that was the best regime. And the important question that arises out of this practical implication about Cicero's ideas is that, you see, unlike the Greek philosophers, whose actual regime were not in existence anywhere on earth, Cicero's ideal regime, Cicero's best regime, was actually in existence, right? Cicero's best regime is found in an actual regime, and that regime was the Roman Republic. Now, this raises an important theoretical question, which we must try to understand and try to ponder upon. Because ultimately, there's nothing more joyous and sublime than pondering upon this thing, contemplating on these essential questions. Of course, as long as we are a thinking being, I think that is the best life to lead, the life of contemplation, the life of thinking, above the life of active participation. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe life of active maybe the life of active participation and life of contemplation is the one and the same thing. Maybe, I don't know, maybe, but okay. So the thing is this: this raises a very important, essential theoretical question, and the question is the relation between the ideal and the reality. Right? You see, the ideal and reality. In other words, how is it possible for the ideal to become actual? Right? How can we make actual that which is ideal? Right? The relation between the ideal and the reality. Because when you look at the Greek thinkers prior to Cicero, they have spoken about the ideal, and then if you look at Aristotle, I think among the three great thinkers, he was the only one who actually took time to actually delve into the issue of the actuality, right? But if you look at it, Aristotle's view about the practical, his mixed constitutions, were to be found, but then not in its absolute sense. Maybe with few minor modifications it can be found, but then it was never actually there. While for Cicero, on the other hand, his actual regime, or his ideal regime, the best regime, can actually be found in reality, and that was the Roman Republic. So for Cicero, what is ideal is actually a reality, right? His ideals were in existence and did exist. However, for his predecessors, the three great Greek philosophers, it was not that the case. It was not the case where their ideals, their ideal regime was translated into actuality, which it could not, given the standards and given what is being demanded from the society itself. It's not really practical. But this is something that we have that we should all try to ponder upon and contemplate, because life, no doubt, is driven by this expectation about fulfilling some sort of an ideal through which we get some sort of a meaning. However, say for instance, in terms of political community or politics, to what lengths should the ideal, or to what lengths should what lengths should we go in order to attain the ideal. Sometimes maybe it's at what cost, right? If you look at the human history, especially the modern human history, people have gone far, right? Regimes have gone far in order to ensure some sort of, in order to attain, in order to realize the ideal. Look at the Nazis' experiment. Look at the experiment done by Mao Zedong in China. Look at what Stalin had done in Soviet Union. Those were some extreme steps taken by society in order to attain the ideal, right? And maybe it makes us question, but maybe it is not. And this is what Cicero is trying to do. Maybe this is what I'm assuming. This is what I'm inferring, not assuming. I'm inferring from Cicero's work. Maybe this is what Cicero is trying to say. To what lengths are we going to go in order to ensure that we attain the ideal? Right? Maybe the ideal is not possible. Maybe the ideal is too ideal. Maybe the ideal is asking too high of a standard from fallible beings, weak human beings like us, who are incapable of attaining the perfect virtuous condition which is usually demanded of in order to reach the ideal, right? So for Cicero, it was more about, like I mentioned in the previous lecture, trying to attain that which is most probable, right, can be attainable. And this is something that we have to think and ponder. To what lengths should we go, or is it even attainable to reach the ideal? And maybe even the ideal itself. Maybe we should even question the ideal itself. Maybe the ideal is ideal in the wrong sense, or maybe the ideal is meant only for the very few. Maybe for the most of us, maybe for the majority of the people in the society, the ideal should be of different standard than the ideal set by the philosophers, or the ideal set by the philosophers for the wise, ideal set by the philosophers for those who are men of wisdom, who are sages. Indeed, they can attain a lot more than we can. A weak human being like you and I, to what perfection can we attain to? To what perfection can we achieve? Very little, right? So I suppose it's a good question to ponder upon, and I think all of us should ponder upon all these things. So it becomes essential for us to contemplate the relation between the ideal and the reality, and the standards to which we adhere to. Maybe Cicero is in a way saying that, and maybe this is also what Aristotle was saying when he contemplated that mixed polity is the best. Maybe it is the most desirable form of government, form of regime. Given that his most ideal regime is not possible. So maybe Cicero's way of saying that the republic is the best form. Why? Because maybe the standard demanded to attain such kind of regime, such kind of ideal, is lesser than the standards demanded upon the individual to attain that level of perfection, that level of virtuosity, right, in order to attain and realize the ideal. So those are some questions which I think we must continue to think of. Obviously, I don't have the answer, and it would be stupid for anybody to say I have the answer, and it is not my job or not anybody's job to say that I have the answer. It is for us as individuals to think and ponder what is possible, and even the standards to which we apply. Maybe, and these are the implications, and these are the implications which we find in. These are some of the implications of what he speaks in Republic that we find in the Officiis, which we will look at. And I think, and we get a clue about what he means, we get a clue as to why he prefers the Roman Republic to be the ideal. Maybe there's an implication which we have not understood yet, and we cannot understand why he says that if we just only read the law and the Republic. In order to understand why he says the Roman Republic is the best ideal regime for him, is that we can only understand why he's saying that only when we look at the Officiis and the Finibus, which we are not going to look at obviously, because for so many reasons which I cannot go into. Obviously, you know why. So the Finibus and the Officiis. But we are going to. But for this lecture, we are going to look at the Officiis only, right? So there we go. So those are the things which we have to, that's why I'm looking at the Officiis, not the Republic, and the law of Cicero. All right. So those are the things which Cicero is trying to tackle, trying to understand, trying to even he is trying to make us aware. And this is blatantly obvious when we look at when we do look at Cicero's work on the Officiis, right? All right. So it also, and we can attain a better understanding of the implication, of the theoretical implications of the questions, like I said, about the relation between the ideal and the reality. Those implications, the relations, even the very question, right? Even the very conception of the notion that what is the relation between the ideal and the reality, it only makes sense to somebody when we try to understand that question from a moral lens, and from a moral perspective. Now, if you are only narrowly focusing only on the literal sense of what Cicero is trying to say, then the very question, what is the relation between the ideal and the reality, seems kind of superfluous, seems kind of stupefying. However, when we take into account, when we take into consideration the moral factor behind the question, what is the relation between the ideal and the reality, then we see the magnitude, right? Then we see the magnitude and the weight of such a question, right? And these are the questions which deserve attention for every thinking man, every thinking person, right? Obviously, if you are all this, forget it. But these are some moral perplexities, questions which deserve attention, which deserves attention of every thinking person in the world, right? No matter the culture and time and space. These are some of the essential questions which all of us must ponder and contemplate. You see, and this brings us to the issue of virtue, right? Because I think virtue for the classical thinkers, from Socrates to Cicero, plays an essential role in politics. It is only when we attain, say for instance, Augustine, Aquinas, and Hobbes and Machiavelli, Locke, Rousseau, that we lose the very concept of virtue from politics. Otherwise, so far as I know, and I do hope that if I'm wrong, please do correct me, but as far as I know from my readings, I think the virtue plays an essential role only for Socrates and Plato and Aristotle and Cicero, and then we kind of lose that the virtuousness of politics once we enter the medieval period to the modern period, i.e. from Augustine to Aquinas to Machiavelli to Hobbes and Locke and blah blah blah, and then there you go. So we have lost that, and then because we have lost the virtuous, hence we lost even the very purpose of. We have misconstrued the purpose, the end of politics, which I have mentioned in the previous lecture. Right? If you have not, go and watch the video. All right. So because the thing is this. When we speak of the relation between the real and the ideal, we can't help but also try to understand the role of our own ethics, or say our own the role of our own individual character in accomplishing or in attaining whatever the goal may be, or whatever the even the very act of understanding the question, the relation between the ideal and the real, requires a person who is, I suppose you can say, who is interested in knowing, right? Interested in knowing it, and that idea goes back to Socrates, right? Interested in knowing things which we don't know, and the quest for knowledge, which kind of occupies most of our lives, for those who are interested in knowing all these things. So when we do speak of the huge implications, right? When we do speak of the huge implications of such a question, you see, we can't help but we should not ignore the moral factor in order to understand what Cicero is saying. And then it comes back to the issue also about our moral character, I suppose, to truly understand the weight of the question, such as should we do this which is convenient, or should we do something because it is right? You see, and those things play a huge role in politics, right? Whether we like it or not, the moral questions. Indeed, if you properly examine politics, every step, every moment of politics requires those who participate in politics, from a lowly citizen to statesmen and leaders. It requires, every moment of politics places upon the actor, upon those who are involved in politics, some moral obligation, some moral conundrum, some moral dilemma, which we are more or less forced to choose. Should we do things because it is convenient, or should we do this because virtue demands it, right? Should we do this because it is good for me, or should we do this because it is good for the society? Should I do this because it is good for the people, or should I do this because it is good for me? If I do this, it is good for me, but if I don't do it, it's good for the society, right? So you see all these things. So every moment of politics entails moral obligations. So these are the things which we will go more into detail in the next lecture. So in the next lecture, we'll go more into the ideas of what Cicero meant by virtue and what it is, and also the different levels of conceptions of morality and virtue, which is very interesting, which we can understand. If you're not a bit differential, then you will have a difficult time understanding Cicero. So in the next lecture, we will discuss all these things, and so see you soon.